Hello students, welcome to our class on current affairs. We're just doing some audio check now to make sure everyone is able to hear us properly. If you're able to hear us, please raise your hands so that we come to know. In case of any audio issues, please mail us or call us. If it's an issue from our end, we'll always announce it. Otherwise, there might be something that you have to correct, which we'll guide you through. Again, if you're able to hear us, please raise your hands. In case of any audio issue, please comment here itself and we'll rectify it. Please check your speakers. Make sure you're ready. Once you're ready, raise your hands if you're able to hear. We are going to start in another 1 minute or so. Along with that, the handouts have been provided to you, which are the essential news clippings from the 2 months we are covering today. Please download the PDFs and keep them with you. There might be useful references while we are discussing. Today's session will be slightly long. We are expecting it to be close to 3 hours. What we'll do is we'll take small breaks of 4 to 5 minutes in between. During that time, you can ask us any doubts you might be having, and you can also freshen up in case it's required. So keep your doubts for those times, and when the class is going on, pay full attention. The handouts you just downloaded, those are not the classroom notes. They're not the revision notes. The revision notes will be coming to you within 2 days. Use the revision notes after the lecture. You can make your own notes if you wish, but the notes will be comprehensive and will cover all the things we're discussing today. The handouts are only for reference. In case anything in the handout is not clearly visible, if you're not able to read properly, if any such issues are there, we're also providing you a link wherein you can go and download the entire newspaper, or you can just search for the headlines from the handouts and you'll get the actual news as well. The handouts are taken primarily from Hindu, Indian Express, PIB and Yojana. So they'll be easily available when you search. Again, the full revision notes will be provided within 2 days. So guys, assuming there are no issues and everybody is ready to go, let's start our webinar session now. First of all, let's get an understanding of what we are trying to do with this current affairs roundup. What is the meaning of a roundup? What all things are we rounding up? And what is the necessity for doing these things? So first term, sources. As you are aware, Hindu is the primary source. So in this session, all important issues and topics which have been covered in Hindu is provided to you in the essential notes clipping, and we'll be discussing some of the more important topics now. Indian Express is the next important source. Again, the same approach has been taken towards Indian Express as well. In PIB, there's a lot of overlap with Hindu and Indian Express. So we have taken those areas which is exclusive to PIB, such as a few government schemes, etc. And those things have been provided to you. In Yojana, what happens is that every month they pick up one issue or one item, and the entire magazine is created around that. So we have also so what we are going to do is we are just going to discuss that particular item. What are the important areas relevant to the exam and present that for you. Detailed examination will again be there in the notes. Now, an important thing to understand is, even though we are covering all these things, we are doing that for 2 months in a space of 2.5 hours to 3 hours. So what that means is that this is actually a crash course. Now, the webinar series cannot be a replacement for your newspaper note taking, for your current affairs preparation, etc. This is a study aid. It is a reference and it's a revision aid. These are the objectives of the webinar course. Now, most students, the biggest trouble they have is to aggregate all these different sources, to isolate the most important issues and to dedicate time to where it is important. That is where this course will help you to find out, even going back to last August, all the important issues, how they have developed over time, and to know how much time to dedicate to each of them, what is the importance to be given to each of them, and how to orient everything towards the exam. That is what we are going to do in the 2 hours, 2.5 hours that will be available to us today. So we have identified all the important topics from all these sources. We will list out the topics. We will give you a brief orientation about each topic, help you understand what are the important issues, what is the topic all about, and how questions will come from these topics, and where most questions can be expected. And if you want direct understanding, if you want to replicate the feeling of having read all the newspapers back from then, even though you might have started preparation much later, you can go through the clippings that is available as handouts. And the revision notes should be used for revising what we are learning here. And the revision notes will include everything we discuss here. After that, you will have quizzes. And the quizzes should be used for practicing and ensuring that you understood and you retain what you learned just now. That is the plan for the webinar. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to list out some of the important topics we're going to discuss today so that you have an orientation towards the entire lecture, and then we'll start picking up one by one and discussing them. The order in which we're discussing topics is almost chronological in nature. It is not based on priority. So what I will do is, when I'm listing a topic, if it is very important, I will highlight it as very important. If it's moderately important, I will highlight it as moderately important, and things that are factual in nature, which is still having a potential for coming in prelims, I'll highlight in that manner. That is how we are going to proceed. So first, let's list out some of the important topics we're going to cover today. One topic is in the agenda is G20. India is going to be chairing G20 as we will discuss. This is moderately important, which I will classify as MI. So multiple types of questions can come from there. That's the meaning of moderately important. However, it is not a must-ask question or anything because it is not a controversial issue. It is not an issue of national importance as of now. However, G20 is a continuing topic and questions can come from it occasionally. Another issue we're going to pick up is gas pricing. Now, gas pricing is a very important topic. Questions can come right from prelims till mains, and even interview questions can come from this. So you should be paying special attention and try to understand in detail the nuances of gas pricing. And here you have to refer to notes, and I would recommend you make your own detailed notes as well. The only reason I'm advising to make your own detailed notes is because when you make your own notes, you tend to remember more. Even though we're providing the notes, it's always advisable to make your own notes. A third issue will be the Syrian civil war. This is again an important issue. It can be classified as very important or a moderately important issue depending on how hot it is before the exam. However, it is overall an important issue and it requires a lot of depth. It's a very in-depth issue because the issue stretches all the way back to the World War I. The roots of the issue stretches back very long, stretches a long time back. So we are not going to cover this in detail. What I have done is I have given the timeline in the notes. You go through that, get an orientation for it, and as we come towards latest months, when we discuss the current affairs of latest months, then we'll give you the full orientation of what has happened right now. Because if we look at what happened in October, November, etc., when Russia was invading Syria, etc., we will not get the full picture of what is happening today. So to do that, we are given you the orientation, start developing the understanding of what is happening, and when we come to a recent month, full understanding will be provided. Another issue is black money. So government has been initiating more and more procedures to tackle the problem of black money. So during these 2 months, one initiative was tried which was moderately successful. So again, a moderately important issue. Now factual questions as well as conceptual questions can come from this particular area. So again, this issue we are tackling only the areas important during that time. Other things came up later. We will be covering that in later webinars. The Netaji files is another topic which again we'll be covering. However, it is more political in nature than factual or UPSC oriented. What we will do is we will discuss how this can be connected back to UPSC. Okay, so we have listed out 5 topics here just to let you know how we are going to proceed. Now let's go back and just start from our first topic and cover each in detail instead of letting you know which are the topics. All the topics will be provided to you along with the notes. So again, audio check. Is everyone able to hear us? In case of any issues, please comment. In case of any doubts, please comment. We will be giving you 5-minute breaks in between. You can use that time to ask all your doubts. Anybody whose hands are raised from the beginning, you can lower the hands now. In case of any issues, only raise the hands. So first topic as we discussed is G20. So why is this in the news? Issue has been discussed in Hindu and Indian Express and it has been headline news. The reason is that India has been picked for chairing the G20. Now, this is just a fact. India is going to chair G20. When are we going to chair? We are going to chair in 2018. This is a factual detail. However, there are some things you should know around it to be able to be confident that you have understood and you can tackle potential questions. One is the concept of Troika. Now G20, what they do is that to ensure continuity of policies, the past, which means the last year, the present and the future. These 3 chairs will together form the Troika and they will have a role in decision making so that things will have continuity across time. So in this particular case, the present is Turkey, the future is China, and the past is Australia. So these 3 things you should be noting. Who are the past, present and future chairs, and because they form the Troika. In addition to that, you should also be knowing the membership of G20. Who are the guys who form a part of G20? So these few things, if you're clear about, you'll be able to tackle potential questions. Another important thing to note is that G20 has 19 countries. The 20th one is EU itself, and EU is not a single country. So G20 actually does not mean 20 countries. It actually includes more than 20 countries because the 20th country is EU. So these are some tricky areas where UPSC might ask questions. So be aware of G20. We have a good understanding of it. Now G20 was started in 1999. So these are some factual details. All these things will be provided in the notes. So don't worry about them. You don't even have to try to by heart them. How do you tackle these factual questions is something that students all the time ask. So what you have to do is get some exposure to them. Just read the fact 3 times. G20 was founded in 1999. Don't try to by heart it or anything. Don't take too much stress about it. Link it to something else that happened in 1999 and you have got exposure now. Then when the options come in prelims, you'll be able to easily answer. That is how we should approach these kind of factual questions or factual items. Other things to understand about G20 is why are they important? They are they are the forefront of the economy in the world. They contribute more than 80% of the economy of the world. So all these areas about G20 we should be aware about. Now another reason why chairing G20 is interesting is because G20 does not have a fixed headquarters. G20 keeps changing the headquarters depending on who's chairing. So G20 headquarters might actually shift to India during that time, during 2018. So these are all the reasons. So these are all the reasons why G20 is important. Now we are going to move into the next issue or the next item in the agenda. That is gas pricing in India. In case anybody wants us to go slower or faster, please let us know. We'll be happy to oblige. Now, the important thing to understand about gas pricing is it is not market determined. The price for gas in India, price for natural gas in India is not market determined. It is fixed by the government. Sorry for the slight gap. There was a slight audio issue from our end. We are going to start from where we left out. We had started the new topic, which is gas pricing in India. Thing to note about gas pricing in India is that it is not market determined. The price is fixed by the government and there is a formula for it. Now, this formula had been recommended first by Rangarajan and now a new formula is being used. In this new formula, it is very simple. It's a weighted average of 4 prices. Now, this is something you have to note. Weighted average of 4 prices. Which are the 4 prices? It is the prices prevailing in US, Canada, UK and Russia. These 4 countries, some index prices are there. There are specific names also which will be provided in the notes which will be getting in 2 days time. The full names are US Henry Hub, Canada based Alberta Gas, UK based NBP, Russian Gas. Not that important, but you should know which 4 countries at least because these are highly possible questions for the prelims examination. Now, these prices are normally picked up with 1 quarter lag. What that means is that we take the prices prevailing 1 quarter before, and this price, which is fixed by government, will be applicable only for 6 months. So after every 6 months, government will release new price. So that is how gas pricing works in India, which is very important to understand. Now, why is this in the news? It is because during these months, new gas pricing had been announced, an 18% reduction in price had been announced by the government, which is why it became important. Now, the controversy around gas pricing, or the problem around gas pricing, is that these 4 countries that has been picked are all of them gas abundant countries, which means gas prices in these 4 countries will always be low price. So low prices there would mean low prices in India, because we have benchmarked our prices to them. Now, what happens if you have low gas prices in India? The gas producing companies like ONGC, they start complaining that we are getting too less price, we are not able to recover our costs, etc. However, government still tries to keep the prices low, because if prices start rising, that can cause inflation, because gas has connection with agriculture, with fertilizer, with transportation. Because of those reasons, government still tries to keep it low, and ONGC, etc. tries to adjust. What else can they do? Because they are also part of the linked to the government. So overall, gas pricing is a hot potato. Hot potato means a contentious issue. Government is the owner of the gas resources in the country. Government has the right to fix the gas. This power was given to the government by the Supreme Court itself. It is a key input in fertilizer, power, city gas distribution, etc. Because of which government wants to keep the prices low. And that is one reason probably why government has picked these 4 countries. In the original Rangarajan formula, that was not how it was. They are also considered import price of gas. Now, when you consider import price of gas, that would tend to increase the domestic price. However, under the new formula, it is not considered, and that has kept the prices low. So in the notes, which you will be getting in 2 days time, again I'm repeating that because you cannot get all this detail only from the handout. Handout is only what is available in the news. We have to go beyond the news and develop our understanding. In the notes, we'll be providing you the exact formula that is used. We'll be giving you the details of the bill that was passed and how the revenue sharing happens between government and these companies. That is also important to understand. So those areas are factual in nature, and we'll be providing it to you. So let's move on to the next topic. The next topic is going to be a much shorter, briefer topic. It is the compensatory afforestation bill. What this bill does is it sets up a national compensatory afforestation fund. It will be part of the public account of India. Now, these are the kind of things you should remember. Now, because this bill has been in the news, because the fund was there in the news, a question can come: National Compensatory Afforestation Fund is part of which account? And you should be able to remember it is part of public account of India. So those kind of areas is where you should be careful to remember. We'll also have a similar state level fund as well, and that will be under the public account of that state. Now, what will this fund be used for? It will be used for compensatory afforestation. It will be based on the value of the forest which the state has, and any other payment linked to preserving the forest. Now, of the total fund, the national fund will receive 10% and the state funds are going to receive the bulk of it, 90%. Again, a factual information to remember. Now there are also planning authorities who are going to manage the fund. So this is a very short topic. However, please remember it because environmental issues are becoming more and more prominent, and environment is a big chunk of our exam. So we have to be careful about whatever is linked to environment. Now we are going to move on to the fourth issue, which is the Syrian war, the Syrian civil war. Now this is one issue we're not going to cover in this particular lecture because it requires a lot of depth, a lot of understanding. What we are going to give you is we are going to give you an infographic along with the notes. So in this infographic, we'll give you the complete timeline. And that will provide you an understanding of how the Syrian civil war has developed. Now, again, to make you understand why we are not covering it in this particular month's current affairs is because October, November, the issue was developing. Things were getting serious. ISIS had formed. So those issues were coming up. Now, it has progressed much beyond that by today. So, when we come to the current affairs roundup of a much more recent month, we will be taking up the same issue and covering it in depth then, and we will take you right up till the exam and give you the latest update. That is the intention of not spending time on an issue like that. However, you should be understanding that from October, November onwards, the issue is a hot issue. That tells you have to be really conversant about it. Whenever you read about it, understand it. The notes will give you the background again. The notes and the infographic will give you enough background that when you read about Syrian civil war, you know what is going on. So that's about Syrian civil war. What we're going to do is we're going to transition to the next topic now. The fifth topic in our webinar today is black money in India. Now this is again a continuing issue. However, there is one part of the black money issue which was captured in these 2 months. So we will take that part of the black money issue and cover that today. The other issues such as Switzerland money, the Panama Papers, all those things will come to later. So what we cover here is the black money, undisclosed foreign income and assets and imposition of tax act of 2015. It is also called the Black Money Taxation Act. Please repeat after me, the Black Money Taxation Act. It was effective from July 1st, 2015. Now what this means is that it will give you, it has certain methods of valuing foreign assets, and it gave people a one-time window, a one-time compliance window, under which if they declare their black assets or black income during that window, they will be exempt from certain penalties, which is part of the act. The window closed on September 30th, 2015. Window closed on September 30th. Now during that window, 3,770 crore worth assets were disclosed by people, and after the window closed, government said that it's going to initiate action against people who did not disclose the window. And what those actions were, what did the government do, that we'll be seeing as we go into the webinars of later months. So that is it about black money. Now we are going to discuss a very interesting, a highly controversial, highly discussed topic, which is the Netaji archives. Now all of you, I'm sure, has read a lot about Netaji archives because there's sort of a lot of mystery associated with it and all those things. However, will questions come about all those things? No. The questions might probably come about National Archives. What is the meaning of National Archives? Where do they place the archives? And even mains level questions can come about India's classification policy. A lot of countries have a declassifying of official papers policy after a set time period. India does not have that. So those issues might come. Or we can have history based questions right out of this. A lot of events in the Indian freedom struggle, Indian struggle for independence, is linked to Netaji in some way or the other. So all those events can come as questions. So these are the things we will highlight in the notes again so that you know where questions will come from. And in the quiz again, please expect at least one question from history. You might not think suddenly how it is linked to current affairs. But remember, Netaji was in the news, so things linked to Netaji can again come as news, come as questions. So beyond this, we are not even going to go into Netaji archives. So this is to give you an orientation of how to treat a news item. News item might be covered in great detail, but we have to be always focused on our goal, which is the UPSC exam. So with that orientation, we should tackle every single issue. So now we have covered 6 topics. We have understood how the lecture is going. Let's take a short break of 5 minutes. During this time, please ask your questions. Please refresh yourself. Please be fresh before we start again. So we are taking a short break. We will resume in 4 to 5 minutes. Please use the time to ask any questions you might be having and to resolve any issues you might be having. Hello guys, welcome back. We are resuming now. So one thing to understand is that when we give briefer coverage to something, that is because it is less important in nature. When we give slightly more coverage to something, it's because it's slightly more important in nature. As we indicated in the beginning, topics has to be classified into very important, moderately important, and factual. So what we're going to do is now onwards, whenever a topic comes, we'll also classify it. So it becomes easier for you to know. And we'll also look at what kind of questions can come from that. So with that orientation, let's proceed again. Next topic in the news during these 2 months, and which was very, very prominent, multiple editorials devoted to it, was the UNFCCC Conference of Parties, which was coming up in end of 2015. Now, what is UNFCCC? United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. There are 3 C's. Please note that United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And what is COP? It is Conference of Parties, and this was COP 21. And it was going to be held in Paris in December 2015. Going to be because we are taking up October-November news here. So during that time, one of the biggest issues was how are people going to commit to new goals? The earlier goals they are committed to, earlier goals were expiring in 2020. So it is essential to make a framework for committing to new goals in this COP21. So one important topic of discussion, one important area of discussion in every newspaper was INDCs. Now what is the full form of INDC? Intended Nationally Determined Contributions. So these are the important words here, nationally determined. So nobody is going to force anything on somebody, but each nation has to voluntarily come out and say, I am going to do these things. These are my goals, and this is how we are going to achieve our targets. And every country will submit this, and then they will see what the potential outcome will look like. So INDCs were hotly being debated then because India had also submitted INDC by that time. So INDCs are public in nature, so every other country can see what every other country is promising. And this is all post 2020 commitments. So after 2020, what is my country going to do? That is this commitment. Now, this is interesting because normally United Nations have a top-down approach. This INDCs also allow a bottom-up approach in which countries also contribute towards the decision-making process. Overall, the outcome should be that the global temperature should not rise by more than 2 degrees Celsius, because this has been identified as a watermark, high watermark. If the global temperature rises by more than 2 degrees Celsius, then a lot of problems will come which is related to global warming. These are part of our environment lectures, so tablet students can refer to the environmental part of the tablet where we have discussed the problems associated with 2 degrees Celsius. But as far as current affairs is concerned, please make sure that you remember it is 2 degrees Celsius which is the global goal. Now INDCs will, each country will commit to what all steps it is going to do, how it's going to address climate change, what all green item agendas it will have in its country's implementation of policies. All these things will be covered. Now Switzerland was the first nation to submit INDC in February. So please note that second nation was European Union. So again, not essential but potential questions. Now what are India's INDC commitments? We are planning to reduce our emission intensity by 33 to 35% from our 2005 level, and we will do this by to 2030. So that is one important commitment from India. This is something you should note. Potential question alert. 40% of our electric power should come from non-fossil fuel areas. Another commitment. The current capacity is 33%. So it is a it is a jump of 33% over our current capacity. So current capacity is very low. We are committing to 40%. We are also going to start a global solar alliance. This will be called INSPA, International Agency for Solar Policy and Application. So this is again something you should remember. Now, how is India going to do all these things? We are going to have cleaner, more efficient technology. We are going to reduce emission in transportation sector, which is again linked to something we'll come to later, the Bharat stage 4 emission, stage 5 emission, etc. We'll come to that later in the lecture. We are going to promote energy efficiency. We are going to have better infrastructure. All these things we are going to do. And we are going to install more solar, wind and biomass electricity. We are going to pursue hydropower electricity and more nuclear power electricity. So solar, wind, hydro, nuclear are going to be focus areas. And Green India Mission is also going to be linked to all this. Now what Green India Mission itself is, again we are not covering here. It will be available in the notes and it's easily available if you search online. Because it is not a current affairs topic, it's a government scheme. It will also be covered in India Yearbook lectures. So that is about INDC as part of COP21. Let's move on to the next topic. Here we are going to discuss the Swachh Bharat. Now again, Swachh Bharat is a continuing policy initiative. It is going to have more and more things accumulating over time. At that point in time, Government of India had started the toilet initiative, starting a lot of toilets, constructing sanitary latrines for households below poverty line. So BPL households should have sanitary latrines. Converting dry latrines to sanitary latrines. Exclusive sanitary complexes for women in villages, exclusively to women. This is some initiatives which started at that time. In addition to all this, another important point of discussion at that time was finance. Where is the money going to come from? So 90 billion rupees were allocated to this in the 2016 Union Budget. Later, a cess was introduced to finance Swachh Bharat, which again we'll come to. The World Bank provided a loan of 1.5 billion US dollars. So these are some items around Swachh Bharat. Total sanitation is another important concept linked to Swachh Bharat, which you should be aware of, which means it is not just about sanitary toilets, etc. It is also about having proper drains, having proper pits, having proper waste disposal. So total sanitation means not only the beginning point, but right till disposal. Everything should be taken care of. So again, that concept you should be aware of. And from this, a conceptual question is also possible. Along with all this, government has started a proper awareness campaign because, as we know, any new initiative in India cannot really be a success without generating public awareness of why it's important and why it's beneficial to the people. So all these things are linked to Swachh Bharat. More facts, more details will be covered again in later months when we will be picking up more initiatives under Swachh Bharat. Ninth issue we are picking up is India-Nepal relations. Now here in this particular lecture, we are going to focus on what happened in these 2 months. However, there is a lot of historical background here as well. So it started back in 1950 with the Indo-Nepal Treaty of Peace and Friendship. So therein we had agreed that we will not tolerate threat to security of each other. We will help each other. We'll have friendly relations with each other. We'll allow movement across borders easily. We will allow each other to live and work in either country. So that treaty of friendship and peace was signed between them. Over a period of time, relations gradually deteriorated primarily because of lot of immigrant issues. So one such issue came up in 2015, which is what is our focus now. This is the Madhesi crisis. So what happened is that a new constitution was promulgated in 2015, and here the Madhesis, they are immigrants along with some Janjadis, Tarus, etc. These guys felt they are being left out. So they started agitating. They started blockading border points. They started fighting against the government. Now here the problem came up that Nepal started accusing India that we are helping them, that we are putting an embargo and not allowing vehicles to pass between India and Nepal, etc., which actually hurts Nepal's trade, hurts their income, hurts their foreign income. Now at that point in time, Indian government had denied this. Nepali government had felt that India is not being very cooperative, so relationships had soured a bit. Further developments will be covered in later lectures. It is important to take this step by step. So that is one benefit of attending through all the lectures, because you will get the full flow of details of how issues developed over time. Now, if you want to immediately get the full context of India-Nepal relations, just go to YouTube, search for Nepal Byju's. If you search this, you will get a video of the Nepal constitutional crisis. If you watch that video, you'll get the full background which is required to understand the issue in depth. The 10th issue we're picking up is again a very popular, highly debated issue, net neutrality. Now this is a very important issue. Science and tech questions, polity questions, etc. can come from this particular topic. Again, this is a continuing issue. We have a video which will give you a full roundup, which is again available on YouTube. Here, important thing to understand is what is net neutrality. First of all, you should be very clear what net neutrality is. It means that an internet service provider as well as the government should treat all data on the internet as the same. The data or website should not be discriminated or charged differentially. So there should not be any differential pricing of internet content or internet services, platform, site, application, whatever it is, anything available on internet, there should not be a differential pricing from the internet service provider or by the government. Now in these 2 months, two concepts were in the news. So let's understand them. You will get a full download on net neutrality once the issue plays out in the next few months, which we'll be covering. So first one is zero rating. Zero rating means an internet service provider gives a zero rating to specific applications or specific websites. Take an example. Take that Reliance has given a zero rating to Facebook application. That will mean that if you use Facebook application, you will not be charged anything. However, this immediately means it's a differential pricing. So it is against the concept of net neutrality. So first point to understand. Second is the concept of free basics, which was promulgated by Facebook. Earlier it was called internet.org. Then it was renamed as free basics. It was in partnership with Reliance Communications as a service provider, and Facebook had basically tried to give as a basic service some services which included Facebook. So this started the net neutrality debate. How it panned out, we will be covering later lectures. Again, if you want to get an immediate download, go to YouTube, search for net neutrality Byju's. You will get a wonderful video which covers them in full detail. The reason I am recommending you to go and watch YouTube is because here we are looking at prelims. We are looking at what kind of questions can come in prelims, because the crash course intended primarily for prelims. However, in the YouTube, you'll get the full coverage required for mains as well, and it will be more than 30 minutes in length. So that kind of length we cannot dedicate in a current affairs crash course wherein we have to cover multiple issues. So we have also provided all these issues in depth for you. Please utilize them as well. We have done that for your benefit itself. There's a slight audio issue. If everybody is fine, let's move forward. In case of any issues, please raise your hands or comment. And please don't hesitate to ask any questions you have. This is a forum. This is the opportunity for you to clear your questions, clear your doubts. You should use this as an opportunity to get very clear on whatever you might have missed out in your reading. You might have missed out a few days, a few weeks. It happens while preparing. We know that because it's a long marathon, which is the whole idea of having a current affairs crash course like this, which will bridge all the gaps in your knowledge. The next issue which created a lot of debate was Aadhaar card. This again is a very important topic, and there are multiple issues related to this. We are not going to pick up all the issues related to this. What we are going to look at is what was the controversy during that time. Now, first of all, let's just understand what is Aadhaar card. It's an individual identification number. It's a basic ID. It will be issued by the Unique Identification Authority of India. It will be proof of two things. It's a combined proof of ID and address, and it will be applicable throughout India. Now, the reason why it was in the news was because government wanted to make it mandatory to avail of certain government services. So plan was to use Aadhaar card for all MG payments, all pension payments, all employee provident fund payments, and Jan Dhan Yojana linkages. This was the idea. However, it was taken to Supreme Court to decide whether it is mandatory or not. Because if the government doesn't have the capacity to roll out Aadhaar card and make it accessible to everyone, and then if we make it mandatory that if you want to get MG Nareka payment, you have to have an Aadhaar card, wouldn't that lead to exclusions? Because of that, it was taken to Supreme Court, and Supreme Court issued that we cannot insist that Aadhaar card is mandatory or has to be produced to avail these basic benefits which the government is providing. So Aadhaar card cannot be mandatory was the Supreme Court verdict. So instead it will be purely voluntary in nature, And why would people use it? Because if it is beneficial, they will use it anyway themselves. Now Supreme Court said that it will decide whether Aadhaar card is also a violation of privacy, and based on that the final call will be taken. Any further developments on this, again, we'll be picking up in later lectures. Now the questions that can come from this will include where all Aadhaar card was proposed to be used, who is the issuing authority, Aadhaar card is linked to what is Aadhaar card, these kind of issues can be picked up by UPSC. The 12th issue we are covering, it was not a full-fledged issue back then. It became a highly politicized issue only later. However, the seeds of the issue were sown back then, which is why I'm just mentioning it here. It is air pollution. The saga began back then because there were reports coming in about how dangerous Delhi air is for children, how suffocating the air is, etc. So Supreme Court had ordered Delhi to make it safer for children. This was before Diwali. So Diwali normally causes a lot of extra air pollution. Supreme Court had mentioned that at that time. Then Supreme Court had put multiple questions to Delhi government about what they're doing. And Supreme Court kept on pressuring the Delhi government until Delhi government had to try more and more methods. So they had tried car-free days, etc. in October, November. But those were all symbolic in nature. So they did not have much of an effect. Eventually, it paved the way to the odd-even formula, which is making waves right now. We still don't know how it all pans out. However, again, there is a YouTube video which is available for you if you want to get a complete understanding about air pollution and also the science behind it. What are the pollutants? What are the various aspects of it? What are the international treaties about it? All these areas, if you want to look at, we have a YouTube video. Again, all you have to do is go to YouTube, search air pollution, Byju's, you'll get a comprehensive video on it. We are not covering that here because it is more of an environmental subject topic than a current affairs topic. What we have to understand is how the issue panned out over time. I'm only mentioning that here because later when we discuss odd even, you will have the context to it because that is the whole idea of the webinar. The 13th topic we pick up is again a long-term issue which came back in the news during these 2 months, which is the Vodafone case. Now to keep it very simple, what was the Vodafone case? The Vodafone India Services Private Limited was sold to Hutchison SR, and this transaction led to a capital gains for Vodafone according to the tax authorities. Now ideally this would have meant a CGT, a capital gains tax would have been applicable to Vodafone. Now what is capital gains tax? Suppose you own anything, suppose you have an Infosys share worth 100 rupees. 1 month later you sold the Infosys share for 120 rupees. The 20 rupees that you gained is capital gains. On that 20 rupees you have to pay tax when you sell it. So Vodafone India would have had to pay capital gains tax. Now Indian tax authorities, the income tax department calculated it comes to 8,500 crore. And asked Vodafone to pay it. Now a concept you should understand here is something called transfer pricing. Now what is the meaning of transfer pricing? It is when anything is sold between two entities within an enterprise. So suppose this is a big company and there are two aspects within the company and something is being sold within that company itself between these two sister enterprises or intermediaries, that is called transfer pricing. Now, on transfer pricing, India has its own authority, transfer pricing authorities, which can determine if it is taxable or not. However, Vodafone took this case to Supreme Court and told that transfer pricing is not applicable here, and Supreme Court held it up. So essential takeaway from us, sorry, for us from this is that government wanted Vodafone to pay tax. Sorry for that. However, Supreme Court was on the side of Vodafone. Vodafone did not have to pay the tax. Now, concept to understand: transfer pricing, capital gains tax. Questions can come on the conceptual part of it. Question will not come about 8,500 crore. It will not come about that. But a question can come: which of the following is transfer pricing? Capital gains tax means which of the following? That kind of questions can come. So please make sure you understand the concepts well. If everyone is able to follow and is able to hear everything clearly and is okay with the pace, please raise your hands. In case of any issues, please do let us know. In case of any doubts, please post your comments. We'll try to resolve them immediately. In case you do not get your answer to the doubts right now, please don't worry. We'll be mailing you all the answers to all the doubts so that you also get to see what others' doubts were and you can utilize the answers to help understand better also. So let's proceed to the next issue. This one, again, a very important issue. A lot of debate, lot of editorials in every important newspaper about this. It is NJAC. What is NJAC? National Judicial Appointments Commission. I'm not writing it down. Listen to me and try to remember. National Judicial Appointments Committee. It's very simple. So NJAC was proposed. What is the objective? It will be for all appointments and all transfers of judges in the higher judiciaries. Now, this was changing a fundamental nature of the Indian constitutional setup of the Indian government itself, which meant it required a constitutional amendment. This was the 99th amendment. Again, a factual deep wave, which might be interesting, which might be coming. Now, the existing system was called the collegium system. So, after the constitutional amendment, the National Judicial Appointments Commission Act came out in 2014. So this much the government did. Now will the Supreme Court sit silently and accept all this? No. Supreme Court examined the NJAC and decided that it's unconstitutional and hence it is void, which means the act will not be applicable. Instead, Supreme Court said, instead of NJAC, we will continue with the existing collegium system, which we will try to reform if required. The reasons given was that the judiciary cannot be liable towards the government, cannot have indebtedness towards the government. That will cause too much bias for the judiciary, and judiciary has to be an independent upholder of the constitution. Judiciary cannot be linked to the government directly, which is the reason given by judiciary. Now, this was an important landmark judgment because it is after 35 years that the judiciary has actually stepped forward and declared that a constitutional amendment which was passed by Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha and cleared the parliament was unconstitutional. The Supreme Court had stepped forward and asserted its authority. So immediately the cries about judicial overreach, etc., came out, which is why it generated a lot of debate. Now, a few details about NJAC is important. Questions might come. Now, NJAC would have consisted of the following members. The chairperson ex officio would be the Chief Justice of India. Two other senior judges from Supreme Court also will be part of the NJAC. The Union Minister of Law and Justice will also be part. Two eminent people will be part of the NJAC. And these two eminent people will itself be nominated by a panel consisting of the Chief Justice, the Prime Minister, and the leader of opposition in Lok Sabha. So effectively, this and this will be having a direct say by the government, which will mean which will mean a government might have an effective majority in the overall NJAC. So that is one of the reasons Supreme Court decided to strike it down. Now, why was Supreme Court able to say it's unconstitutional? The reason is because the structural nature of the Indian government, which divides the system into legislature, executive and judiciary, depends on airtight distinction between these three, especially for judiciary. The moment the government, the legislature is able to appoint people to the judiciary, that distinction can be compromised. So that is part of the essential nature of the constitution, the essential structure of the constitution. And based on that, Supreme Court decided it's unconstitutional. Now, an interesting statement by the government was that NJAC represents the will of the people. Supreme Court had a counter to this. Supreme Court said that NJAC represents the will of the majority today. The Constitution represents the will of the people. And Supreme Court will always uphold the Constitution and the essential nature of the Constitution. And so overall, the NJAC was discarded. A lot of debate was there surrounding it about how to make the Supreme Court more transparent, etc. So Supreme Court later initiated some reforms which we will be covering and picking up later. However, these areas about NJAC should be very clear about. Let's move on to the next topic. This is again a seed topic, which means the full elaboration will come in later months. I'm just introducing it here because you'll know the context. That is India-Japan cooperation for high-speed trains or bullet trains. So Japan decided to give financial assistance to India for the Mumbai-Ahmedabad corridor, where we wanted to develop high-speed trains. Later, a lot of analysis was done about the feasibility, financial feasibility of it, etc. We will be picking up that debate and discussing that in later lectures. The 16th issue we're picking up is gold bonds. Now, gold has always been a problem area for the government of India. This is what reason is because inflation is always high, people always treat gold as an investment option. And because India does not have indigenous supplies of gold, only 3% of our gold demand we are able to meet domestically. This means majority of gold has to be imported. Now, the moment you have to import gold so much, gold import starts to affect our current account deficit. Now, what is current account deficit? Is the difference between our exports and imports. So, moment imports become more than exports, we'll start developing a current account deficit, and more gold being imported, high value items being imported means current account deficit starts building. which means you'll have to take loans, etc., to be able to meet the requirement for foreign exchange being generated there. Full treatment of current account deficit is given in our tablet courses, which is part of our economy lectures dealing with foreign exchange. Here we are discussing the gold bond part and the fact that gold impacts the current account deficit. So what is a gold bond? It is nothing but a simple government security. It's a government security, also called as GSEC sometimes. It will be issued by RBI. Where can you buy it? You can buy it from post offices as well as any scheduled commercial bank. So effectively, it is a government security which is linked to gold. So you'll get the same return from a gold bond as you would if you invest in gold. Now, if you can get the same return as from gold, the idea is hopefully you'll start investing in gold bonds instead of gold if it is an investment option. So overall idea is to provide you a good investment option which will take away some of the demand from gold and thereby improve our current account deficit position. And the extra gold that is freed up can be used as collateral for loans, can be traded on stock exchange, etc. And that will reduce demand and help India overall in a foreign exchange situation. So this is the idea behind gold bond. We'll come back to gold bond again a bit later because government further introduced new schemes to counter the gold problem. So we'll pick that up again a bit later in the same lecture, today's lecture itself. The 17th topic we are picking up is primarily factual in nature. This is the Nobel Prizes. Now, it is a good idea to quickly understand which are the different Nobel Prizes and who got the different Nobel Prizes and why they got it. So in the notes, you'll get a proper table which will illustrate all these things for you. You will have to glance through it a few times so that you develop a familiarity towards it and you'll be able to answer questions easily. Now, out of all the Nobel Prizes this year, which are the important ones? One, physics, linked to neutrino research, very important Nobel Prize. You should remember that. The details again will be given in the notes. We are not discussing it here. It's slightly technical in nature also, not fully required. However, it's good to have an understanding. Second is economics Nobel. Normally every year it's important. This year also it's important because it's linked to developmental economics. And there's a good linkage to India in this year's Nobel Prize in economics. Third one that is important is medicine. Why? Because it is linked to parasitic diseases such as malaria. And a lot of parasitic diseases has been in the news such as dengue, H1N1, etc. So because of that, this Nobel also becomes slightly important. So details will be available in the notes. Please make sure you read the details and try to remember the important salient features of each of the Nobel Prizes. So we are moving on here because discussing all these will take up a lot of our time. Instead, you can utilize the notes. The next issue we are picking up now is the Uniform Civil Code. Now, what does Uniform Civil Code means? It means there should be a uniform set of laws for every citizen in the country, and religion should not be a consideration in determining what is legal in terms of civil offences or in terms of civil activities. So criminal code, for example, it's uniform throughout the country. However, civil code based on religion, we have certain exemptions, we have certain different clauses, different communities have their own clauses, etc. For example, in terms of marriage, in terms of inheritance, etc. So Uniform Civil Code is essentially a call for uniformity throughout the country on all these aspects. So which are the major issues which will be covered under this? Marriage, divorce, inheritance, adoption, maintenance of old parents, children, etc. So different religions treat these things differently. However, human rights and basic morality tells us that there are certain right ways of doing these things, and Uniform Civil Code will embody what the people of the country believe is the right thing to do about these things. It will also embody the international best practices and will hopefully have something that is acceptable by the majority of the country. That is the idea, the call for Uniform Civil Code. Now, there's a lot of history linked to this. It stretches back to Ambedkar. It also touches on Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. It also links to Nehru, because these are all important proponents, people who were debating Uniform Civil Code. So questions from history can also come because Uniform Civil Code came back in the news. Now, why was it necessary? It is because the Supreme Court had recently just prodded the government once that there should be some conclusion regarding whether you're going to frame a Uniform Civil Code or not. So Supreme Court asked a question of the government. Because of that, it came in the news. Now, Uniform Civil Code, a polity-based question can also come. For example, Article 44. A question can come, which of the following is linked to Article 44? Now, what is Article 44? The state shall endeavor to secure for the citizens a uniform civil code throughout the territory of the country. So Article 44 essentially says Uniform Civil Code is a duty of the state to procure for the citizens of the country. However, since it's a directive principle of state policy, it is not legally enforceable. It's up to the government to pass a separate law to make it legally enforceable. Now, there is also an argument against Uniform Civil Code, which can also come as a polity question. These are Articles 29 and 30, which essentially says we have the right to follow our own religion, culture, customs, etc. Now, if a custom says something about marriage, how can Uniform Civil Code overwrite it? So this could be a clash between two articles. So these are reasons why Uniform Civil Code has not made good progress. There are conflicts within the constitution itself, and there are plenty of conflicts in the society also. So Uniform Civil Code has historically been something that is stalled. It has come back in the news, which itself is a major thing. So we should be aware of the historical context as well as some polity related aspects of Uniform Civil Code. The next topic that was in the news is ethanol blending policy by the government. So this was covered in good detail in the last current affairs roundup, which was completed 2 weeks ago, which was related to August and September. So there we had gone into detail about ethanol blending. So we're not covering this again. You have access to the video from that class as well. So if you are interested, please go and refer to that. Ethanol blending is also a very important topic. So it's essential that you have a good understanding about that. Next topic is sugarcane and farmer suicides. So what is the issue here? To understand this, we have to understand one important thing. That is that there are farmers, there are millers, and then there is government. Now the farmers is assured a price by the government, which the millers have to pay. However, the millers have to sell in the market. And this is more or less deregulated, which means this market determined price. Now what will happen is that sometimes the market price might drop drastically, which means the millers will not get much money. However, they have to pay the farmers. Sometimes the millers will not have the money to pay the farmers, and then what happens? The millers will say to the farmer, I will give you later. Now suppose the miller told, I'll give you this 100 rupees later. What is happening? That has become an arrear. That's the concept of a arrear. So over a period of time, what happened is that the millers kept on postponing payments to the farmers because they themselves were not getting enough money. Now this price, please remember the name for the price. It's called fair and remunerative price. Please remember this name. And this was supposed to be paid within 14 days. So government has an obligation that the farmer gets the money within 14 days. However, this arrear has kept on building. Government has not been able to implement these things. Now, over a period of time, what has happened is that up to 12,000 crore has started developing as arrears. So how can the government help the farmers? One way to do is government has started giving loans to the millers, soft loans. So some 6,000 crores were given as soft loans, but that was again not enough because the millers were themselves under a lot of stress. Government has also planned to start a sugar stabilization scheme, which will basically have a fund which will allow government to help out the farmers whenever required. The reason all this is required is because all these arrears, the farmers itself are not able to bear, and a lot of these farmers are now resorting to suicides. So increasing farmer suicides because of building arrears from millers who themselves are under stress and the government is not able to help out. Which is why it's an important issue which the government is trying to tackle in multiple methods. So later development in this we'll pick up in later lectures. So again, we'll take a short break here of 3 to 4 minutes. Use this time to ask your questions, clear your doubts, and be fresh so that we can absorb more of what has been covered in the lectures. Hello everyone, welcome back. We are restarting after a short break. In case anyone was not able to hear during this time, it was because it was a break. Now, some of the questions that are coming in are factual in nature. So we'll be compiling all those and giving it back to you within a day or two. Whichever questions are important for understanding the lecture, we are answering immediately. So please don't worry in case your question is not immediately addressed. You'll be getting all the answers in a single compilation. The next issue we're picking up is related to RBI. The reason we are doing this is again because it had implications later. RBI had done some rate cuts during that time. So what RBI did is RBI announced a 0.5% rate cut. However, RBI found that on average the banks were giving only a 0.25% rate cut to the customers, which meant that RBI's rate cut is not getting passed on. That is the terminology used. The rate cut is not getting passed on to the end users. So RBI is giving at a lower rate to the banks now. However, the banks are not passing on that benefit to the customers. Even SBI, which is always the good boy in RBI's class, gave only a 0.4% cut. Still not a 100% pass on. So at that point, RBI started debating different ways in which how we can ask the banks to pass on the benefit. This has led to new formulation of the blending rate, etc., which has been in the news recently, in the recent months. So we'll pick it up again when it comes in the news in later months. However, please remember that the issue started much earlier. $22nd again is something we're not discussing in detail here. This is just to give you an indication that dengue, other diseases, whenever these things come in the news, you should be aware of some things. Which are the vectors? Which are the carriers? How does the infection spread? Is it through water? Is it through air, etc.? What was the origin? Was there a breakout area? What measures can be taken? What existing measures are there? Are there any government existing programs? All these things you should be aware of no matter which disease comes in the news. This will be part of a science and tech discussion. This will be part of a science and tech preparation. So we are not going to pick up every single disease and cover. An important disease with a lot of data around it like H1N1 will give some importance to that. However, whenever a disease comes in the news, make sure you have these data points with you. Next issue which has generated a lot of controversy is OROP. So here also it is a continuing issue, and actually this will be picked up in more detail in the next lecture because only by that time it became a prominent issue. The simple idea is parity in pension for people of same rank and duration of service, irrespective of time of retirement. So suppose somebody was of rank A for a period of X years. However, he retired in 1990. Now somebody else with the same rank who served the country for the same number of years retires in 2015, he actually ends up getting a higher pension. This was felt to be discriminatory in nature, which is why they agitated for a single pension for everybody, parity in pension. Government actually came up with some schemes under which government proposed it. However, it was still not acceptable. It was politicized, etc. We'll be picking up those aspects in the next lecture. Here, we're just indicating that the issue had started to come into prominence. The next issue for us is ease of doing business and India's ranking in that. This is a statistic you should always pay attention to. This is useful because it might come as a prelims question. It's also useful because it can be used in multiple mains questions. Any question which links to an economy and to the industry, you can mention this. That India's ease of doing business is so and so, and that is one area where reforms are required, etc. So in the ease of doing business in 2016, it is released by World Bank. Please remember that. India came out at 130 out of 189 countries. That is a very bad rank. However, in 2015, we were 142. So we had an improvement there. Now, why did we improve? Because in two areas we showed notable improvement. One is starting a business. Second is getting electric connection, getting electricity. In these two areas, we were able to show some improvement. Sorry for the slight disturbance. We had a minor issue with the screen. In case you saw a green screen, it is okay. It was for everybody, so you didn't miss anything. So we were discussing that there were two reasons why India started ranking higher in ease of doing business. So now you can see the screen. We were discussing there are two reasons. One is being able to start businesses slightly faster and electricity can be easily acquired. So these two things you should be keeping an eye on. You should be remembering. Now Singapore was the first. China was ranked 84. Pakistan was ranked 138. So below India, as always, giving us some comfort there. New Zealand was number 2. So some data points like this, you don't have to remember all these things. So overall, ease of doing business is to track how effectively countries help business operations in the country. So here multiple things are tracked. Which all areas are tracked? What are the considerations? The list will be provided for you in the notes. So please make sure you go through the list and get an understanding of what all areas are considered before allocating the ease of doing business ranking. Now our next topic is from Science Reporter. So in October month Science Reporter, the most important and the most potentially questioned area is AstroSat. It is India's first dedicated astronomy satellite. So this is meant for astronomical observations, for going and observing the universe, for discovering, for examining cosmic rays, neutrino research. There are multiple applications for it. So the link to the actual article as well as the PDF of the actual article will be provided in the notes. Questions are not expected directly about this. However, a prelims question about AstroSat is linked to which of the following can be expected, but detailed analysis is not required. Hence, we are not discussing it here. However, we are still providing it in the notes so that an interesting topic can still be appreciated by you guys. Next, we're introducing you to the Yojana issue of the month, which is skill development. So in October month, Yojana had picked up skill development and had gone around it and picked up all the important areas around it and discussed all those areas. So here again, we are going to give you a full gist of Yojana. It is about Skill India, and there are different schemes linked to it. So again, highly factual in nature. So we'll give you the full list of schemes and the highlights of every scheme. We will give this to you in a very easily rememberable tabular format so that you can keep it somewhere easily visible and you can study it fast, because Skill India is linked directly to Make in India and hence it's a very important topic. We don't have time here to pick up every single government scheme and discuss that. However, one thing you can be assured of is all these government schemes will also be part of the India Yearbook discussion, which is why in our current affairs discussions we will not give extra importance to government schemes, because all government schemes will anyway be covered under India Yearbook. However, please note that Yojana Skill Development, Skill India, please make sure you read the gist of Yojana which we will be providing to you and the list of schemes and the highlights of schemes. Now we are moving into November. There was a slight pause in audio. Don't worry, you didn't miss anything. We're starting November now, the November issues. One of the first issues we're picking up is again linked to arrears. So again, the poor of the country had been promised certain amount of money from the government. However, the money was not coming to them. So again, arrears are building over time. And this time it's linked to another government scheme, which is MGNREGA. Here, the amount of arrears amounted to 3,200 crores. So essentially, the payment which was supposed to come to the laborers, the rural laborers, had been pending for quite some time, and now Supreme Court has decided to intervene in that. So this is supposed to have affected around 14 million people. So it is a major issue. However, here the only takeaway for us is that there are arrears in MGNREGA. So that is all we have to remember. Even the 3,200 crore cannot be really a question. However, this can be a useful information when you are constructing a mains answer later on. Moving on to the next topic, the monetary policy Committee. Now this is very similar to the NJAC we discussed earlier. The Supreme Court and even the RBI are supposed to be independent institutions. There is a reason why they were given that independence. That is because government intervention in these core activities might actually compromise the effectiveness of these institutions. So under MPC, again, there was a scope for government intervention into RBI functioning. And hence this generated a lot of debate. Now to understand MPC, the idea is simple. Whatever the Reserve Bank governor is doing now, i.e. all the monetary policy of the country will now on be done by a committee, which is the MPC. So the composition of the MPC was the moot point. So different compositions were proposed, and the full discussion about how the composition and the proposals evolved over time is available on YouTube again. So it is recommended that you just go to YouTube, Google Monetary Policy Committee BYJU'S, and you will get the video and you can watch the video for a full understanding. It is important to understand this because this has also some linkages to later developments such as inflation targeting, which we'll be covering in later lectures as well as in our economic survey discussion. Now we are moving on to a more international topic, which is the nuclear suppliers group, or the NSG. Now what is this NSG? It is a 48 nation group, and it is a group that decides and controls all nuclear related exports. So effectively this group has control over which countries can have access to nuclear material, and including nuclear fuel, which means if you want to have nuclear powered fuel, if you want to have access to international nuclear fuel, you have to go through NSG. Now interesting thing to note here is that it was set up in 1974, and one of the reasons for that was because India had conducted its own nuclear tests, and proliferation of nuclear capability was something that the world was in general worried about. So they started the nuclear suppliers group to limit access to a potentially dangerous material. Now India has been trying to be a member of NSG, and being a prominent nuclear power today, it has been debated multiple times. However, because of internal politics, which includes China, Pakistan, etc., the NSG has yet to accept India. So this is still a point under debate. The next topic we're taking up is again linked to gold. Now we discussed gold bond earlier. Now we are going to discuss two more schemes which is linked to gold. All the schemes idea is the same. Gold imports are a problem, has to be reduced so that the current account deficit can be reduced. So what are the three schemes? All in all, we can quickly summarize them as the gold monetization scheme, the sovereign gold bond scheme, and the bullion scheme. Now what is the meaning of each of them? Gold monetization scheme is essentially a deposit scheme So under this, you deposit gold and you take money back. So effectively, you converted your gold to money. Now under sovereign gold bond scheme, it's as simple as a government security as we discussed already. So effectively, you are investing in a government security which is linked to gold. So it will be equivalent to investing in gold. And what is a bullion scheme? It is nothing but a gold coin scheme under which Government of India is going to introduce gold coins which can be used as currency. Now here prelims questions etc. can get asked because it's the first ever national gold coin and it will bear the Ashoka Chakra as the symbol. So that is it about the three schemes. Please remember all the three schemes. All the salient features and details will be given in the notes. Here we're just trying to understand what the schemes mean and why they are relevant and a way to put them in our memory and remember them well. Next topic we're picking up is GSAT. This we are picking up from PIB as well as from Hindu. Now GSAT is a communication satellite. We have GSAT 15 and 16. This is supposed to replace the INSAT system. It will also carry the Gagan payload. The Gagan is for GPS. So these are all highly factual stuff, as you can see. All of them will again be available in the notes. However, when a satellite etc. is launched, questions tend to be factual in nature. So you have to make sure you understand the factual parts also well. So GSAT is developed by ISRO. GSAT 16 is going to be launched in French Guiana. It is going to be used for telecommunication, telemedicine, etc. So all these aspects of it will have to be remembered, and it is worth remembering because potential questions are there from all these factual aspects. The next topic is Swachh Bharat cess. Now we had seen Swachh Bharat earlier, some of the things linked to Swachh Bharat, and we had mentioned that finance was an aspect which the government was considering. So government had put some money into the scheme etc. Now what the government introduced in November was the Swachh Bharat cess of 0.5%. And where will this cess be applicable? The cess will be applicable on services. So effectively, service tax increased by 0.5% because of the Swachh Bharat cess. Now the money generated through this cess is supposed to be used for all the activities linked to Swachh Bharat, such as toilets, sanitation, total sanitation, etc. Now Swachh Bharat, please note that is also linked to a lot of diseases, right? A bulk of diseases that are common in India, such as malaria, cholera, etc., is linked to sanitation. So one way to ensure that the demographic dividend that we keep talking about all the time is achieved is to have a healthy India. And it is to go towards that goal that the Swachh Bharat has been introduced. And the cess is supposed to be a contribution towards that. Now, speaking of diseases, we will now come to an important disease which has been a lot in the news, which is H1N1. Now, here the full form etc. is important. H means hemagglutinin. N means neuraminidase. Direct questions might not come, but you can even expect match the following type of questions from this, which is why I'm just mentioning this here. Now, H1N1 is a super virus which can affect multiple carriers. So birds, swine, which is effectively pigs, horses, humans. So the multiple carriers, multiple ways in which the disease can be propagated. Now it was during this time the news came that the H1N1 strain in India was a mutated version of earlier strains which was more dangerous. Now this led to a lot of panic, and you might have remembered that a lot of people were walking around with masks. Now wearing those masks was effective because it is an aerially transmitted disease. Now the next 2-3 topics we are not going to cover in detail because they are more international in nature and direct questions in prelims are not expected much. However, we are just mentioning that these topics were prominent during this time. So please don't worry, when we are not covering something in detail, it is because they are slightly less priority. When we cover something in more detail, it's because slightly higher priority. As we mentioned, very important, moderately important, and purely factual. Myanmar elections had happened. So there's a lot of history behind this. Then there is the Indo-Africa summit that happened. Because of which geography questions based on Africa etc. can be expected. So you should be familiar with the map of Africa. So please download a map of Africa. Just see where all the countries are, where the important rivers are, where the important mountains are. That kind of question can also come because Africa has been prominently in the news. Ninth one is very important. FDI reforms, sectoral. So sectorally we are opening up the FDIs. So here what it means is that in different areas, say insurance, defense, etc., FDI norms have been relaxed by the government. So the exact percentages you should be remembering. So the full list will be provided to you. You have to by heart this. There is no option here. You have to by heart the full list of FDI sectoral reforms. So some examples I'll give. Defense sector became 49%, automatic route. Construction 100%. Single brand retail allowed to sell through e-commerce now. So these agenda items of the FDI reforms are very important. The full list will be given to you. There is nothing to specifically discuss except list out each of them. So the list will be provided to you. Please make sure you study each of them because each item in that will be a potential question. Now the next topic we are picking up is again something that generated a lot of headline news. It is the Paris terror attacks. Now questions won't come directly about the Paris terror attacks. Questions won't come that Friday 13th November of 2015. Terrorist attack Saint Denis in Paris. A question will not come about that. What questions will come is about what reactions, what policy measures were taken after that. So one example is that the G20 members came together and decided to have a coordinated action against ISIS because ISIS had claimed that they take responsibility for the Paris attacks. So a demand was made in the UN to push through something important called the CCIT, which is the Comprehensive Convention on international terrorism. This had been proposed by India. So please note this name. Back in 1996. Now, along with this, ISIS also becomes an important topic for us. So again, we discussed the Syria war earlier. So Syria war is again linked to ISIS, plus Iraq is also directly involved. Now there is a global global terrorism index. Now what this index means is that it determines which nations are most affected by terrorism in the world. In that, of 162 countries, India ranks at 6th position. So India is one of the top most affected countries by terrorism in the world. This is a data point you should remember, and you can use in mains, it might come in prelims, etc. Now, which is a major law against terrorism in India? It is the unlawful activity Prevention Act. The UN Security Council as an important player as far as international terrorism is concerned, and there's also a great linkage to black money and terrorism, which we'll be picking up later in a further lecture. Next topic we are covering is Chennai floods. So again, something which every one of you would be very familiar with. Now, what should you study about this? Which areas were affected? The Coromandel coast. Tamil Nadu, parts of Andhra Pradesh, parts of Pondicherry or Puducherry. But Chennai was one of the most hard hit. 500 people were killed, 18 lakh people displaced, 15,000 crore worth of damage. All these data points are there. Now this was because of the northeast monsoon. Please remember that, because in November the northeast monsoon is what comes, and it has been linked to the El Nino event, which is supposed to have caused this unseasonal rain. Now here, because of this, what kind of questions can come? Questions will come about disaster management specific to floods. So please make sure you cover the disaster management module in the tablet if you are a tablet student, or from your material, and be very aware about the flood component. Now geography based questions about how floods happen, etc., can also come because of this. So be aware of those things. Make sure you link all current affairs areas to your basic syllabus and study accordingly, because questions can come from syllabus aspects as well. Our current affairs webinar is focusing on the current affairs part, but we will give you indication of whenever linkages is happening to syllabus areas. Another topic for us which has continuing impact and which was prominent in news during that time was the GST logjam. Now if you want to have a quick rundown of what is GST, all you have to do is again go to YouTube, Google GST Byju's, and you'll get a video which explains to you what is the meaning of GST, how GST works, etc. Now GST, or goods and services tax, is a way of having a consolidated indirect tax regime in India, which will allow a national market to be created in India, which means that goods and services can be easily exchanged across states in the entire country. So that is something that the government wants. It's expected that a lot of revenue will be generated from that because of tax savings, because people are not able to avoid tax easily, etc. Now, why people are not able to avoid tax under GST regime? Again, please watch the video for a comprehensive understanding. Now, why is there a logjam? It is because the center wants GST and the states are not very keen on that. Plus, at that time, the ruling party wanted GST badly. However, the opposition was opposing GST primarily for political reasons, and the opposition had a majority in the Rajya Sabha, or rather the ruling party does not have a majority in the Rajya Sabha. So GST bill cannot be pushed through until Rajya Sabha also agrees. And because of this, because these two parties cannot come to an agreement, GST was in a logjam. Logjam means stuck. Now this continued until the actual parliamentary session, at which point GST bill could not be passed. So the origins were here. When we cover the parliamentary session in a later discussion in current affairs webinar, we will be covering the details of the GST and why it could not be pushed through. However, please note that the GST logjam had started a few months before itself. Next topic for us is DPP or Defense Procurement Policy. Now, what is the meaning of Defense Procurement Policy? This is the system under which government procures defense equipments, etc. Now, the Ministry of Defense had set up an expert committee on understanding how defense procurement can facilitate Make in India. The idea is that we want to make more things in India. Why not involve Make in India in defense procurement, defense production as well, in defense manufacture as well? So DPP procedure had to be streamlined towards allowing Make in India to happen, which is why a DPP 2015 was required. The original DPP was in 1992. Since then, it has been revised frequently. 2011, 2013, etc. It had been revised. And now the latest revision is to make it in tune with Make in India. Now, main agenda here for us is there are 4 subcategories under this. First subcategory is Buy Indian Bar Global, which means directly purchase from Indian or global manufacturers. Second category is Buy and Make. This means we will buy from foreign partner and then we'll use that technology to make in India. So this is effectively technology infusion. We are buying from them only to get the technology and then we'll make in India. So the transfer of technology to India from the foreign partner. The third category is Make India. Here we will develop from scratch in India itself. These are the categories. Now the first category can be split into 2. So overall we have 4 categories. Now again, you'll get all the details in the notes. Make sure you study them in detail because direct questions can be asked about this. Next topic for us is the Paris Climate Summit. So we had mentioned this earlier. Now in this month, the Paris Climate Summit actually comes about. So here the idea is the countries around the world, 148 countries, come together and pledge that we have to limit global warming. And what is the limit agreed upon? Again, as discussed, very important, 2 degrees Celsius. And what is this 2 degrees Celsius? 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. So whatever was the temperature of the earth, global average pre-industrial levels, above that only 2 degrees Celsius should be growing, and that should happen. And we should set targets for 2030 based on this aim. Now every country, as we discussed, submitted INDCs. Now it was calculated that if every country followed its own INDCs, we will end up having a 2.7 degrees Celsius raise by 2100. China will be the peak emitter. Second would be US. and India will actually come in at 4th. So please note this, India is one of the major emitters and has the potential to become one of the major emitters, which is why action by India is also essential here. And we have discussed our INDCs earlier, and considering that we haven't had much of a historical impact on climate, these India's INDCs are considered to be reasonable in nature. Now another number to remember here is that up to a 5 degrees Celsius increase is forecast if current emissions continue. If everybody follows their own, then it will be 2.7 degrees Celsius. However, the target is 2 degrees Celsius. So these three numbers, please keep in mind, can come as prelims questions. However, you can also use them in your mains answers. Now, the full detail will be given in the notes. Plus, if you want to have a video discussion on it, again, go to YouTube, search for Paris Climate Summit. You will be able to find our video, which will give you a complete rundown on the entire discussion as well as the historical context, which is essential for understanding any climate summit. Next topic is GMO, genetically modified organisms. The reason we are bringing up here is because there are 2 articles in Science Reporter which deals with GMOs. However, they are not highly in the news items. So what we have to understand is what genetic modification means, how is it different from artificial selection, and we should have a few examples such as GM cotton, GM brinjal, etc. Now, genetically modified means you have to take a gene from some organism and introduce it into another organism to modify that organism. That is when something is genetically modified. Artificial selection is when you have a crop of 5 or 10 or 500 and you select 2 that are best, and next generation you only sow those or only replicate those. So this time more of your population will be the type that you want. So again, you remove the ones you don't like and only propagate the ones you like. So after many generations, you will reach a point in which the original stock and the new stock is completely different. So here we are artificially selecting for only the things we want. That is artificial selection. So all of our agricultural products that we use today is based on artificial selection. None of them are naturally available in nature. So if you look at corn, original natural ancestor versus what is available today, it is highly different. However, genetically modified means we have used the power of our genetic engineering to introduce a gene or certain genes into the genome of a particular organization to modify the behavior. So that is where the controversy comes, because we don't know the long-term implication of what this will mean, because of which people are not trusting GM crops. So there are main issues are about labeling, how GM crops should be separately labeled so that people can be aware when they buy, banning. There are some countries which want to actually ban GM crops because the long-term implication on our health as well as on the biodiversity is not yet fully known. So such issues are there. So we will be providing you the PDFs as well as the gist of these articles in the notes. So please have a look at them to have a good understanding about GMO. And whenever a news comes about GMO, please understand questions will tend to be science and tech oriented in GMO and not so much policy oriented, because these are controversial in nature. Now the next topic we're picking up is from PIB. So again, repeating, From PIB, we are picking up only those topics which are not overlapping with Hindu and Indian Express. So one topic is International Maritime Council. So it was formed in 1959. It is the organization that decides all factors related to global shipping. So the global shipping industry related aspects are covered under International Monetary Council. So India became a member in 1959. It has 40 member countries. Now why is International Monetary Council in the news? Because in 2015, India was re-elected as a member of International Monetary Council. So that is one reason why it was in the news, and PIB had covered that. Another issue which PIB had picked up and covered is jute price hike. There was inflation happening in jute industry in India. This was happening because of a lot of hoarding, and there was an export ban by Bangladesh. So both this meant that there was a reduction in supply and hence an increase in prices in jute. So what the government started doing is government started de-hoarding measures and collaborating with Bangladesh to lift the export ban. So just remember these items about the jute price hike or the jute price rise. Now we come to Yojana. This is the November issue of Yojana. The topic under discussion was transportation or transport. So Yojana picks up urban transport and discusses some schemes related to that. One scheme we should be aware about is Amrut. The full name for Amrut is Atal Mission for Rejuvenation and Urban Transformation. Atal Mission for Rejuvenation and Urban Transportation. So it's easy to remember. Just remember rejuvenation and urban transportation. Now this is actually the new name for JNURM, which is Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission. So this is one aspect about urban transport, urban renewal we should be aware about. Second is linked to the ports of India, the Sagar Mala initiative. The idea of Sagar Mala is we will develop a string of ports around the Indian coast. 7,500 kilometer long coastline India has. So we want to promote a lot of port-led development. So Sagar Mala has to be created, which encourages a lot of transportation, lot of activity around the ports. Now the Union Ministry of Shipping is the nodal agency for Sagar Mala initiative, and it has three pillars: port-led development, port infrastructure enhancement, and efficient evacuation. So whenever a disaster etc. comes, these ports and the activity and the ships around that will be available for immediate evacuation. So that kind of orientation is what is there for Sagar Mala. Now there is also a NSAC, National Sagar Mala Apex Committee. It is not yet formed. it's envisaged, which will allow for coordination between all these ports. So these are the major issues we are covering today. Hope you got a good orientation towards how to pick up important topics from the news and how we should look at different topics. Now what we'll do is we'll pick up some of the questions that have been addressed to us and we'll try to answer them. If your question has not been answered, please post your question. We will be getting back to you with detailed answers within a couple of days' time. The notes will be available in 2 days. The quiz will be available in 2 days again. Please make sure you read the notes and revise what we learned today and also cover the details of all the schemes, etc. that we discussed. And make sure you use the quiz for practicing. And please get back to us on any feedback on how we can improve, whether you would like extra coverages, is there any issue you wanted to be discussed. We can pick up those issues and discuss in more detail in further lectures. So please let us know and we will try to accommodate for those things as well. So now let's look at some of the questions. So a quick 1-minute break. In case you have any questions, please type it out for us. So a lot of people have asked us about G20. Membership, why it's essential, etc. So these are highly factual nature. So it will be available in notes. So don't worry, we'll be giving you the details of it. Another question has been asked about GST and money bill. This is a very good question. However, the details of this will be covering in a further lecture when we are going to go into more depth about GST. In today's lecture, we are only planning the seed of GST because GST was just coming into prominence because the ruling party was trying to push GST and the opposition party was trying to stall GST. The reason why GST is the discussion on GST as a money bill, etc., came into prominence in December during the parliament session, and hence we'll be covering it during that current affairs webinar. Another question that has been asked is about FDI and automatic route. Now this is a very simple thing. All this means is that suppose there is an industry in which it is specified that till 49% is automatic route and till 75% is non-automatic. All this means is that till 49% no permission is required, the FDI will be automatically approved. But beyond 79%, it has to go via FIPB, which is the body which will regulate all FDI, and FIPB has to give approval before the FDI is allowed to come inside India. However, this body is known to be very flexible and easy in its approvals. So even if it's non-automatic route, it does not mean that the FDI is not able to come in. So that is the difference between automatic and non-automatic. Automatic means no approval required. Non-automatic means FIPB approval is required. Another question asked is, how will bullion scheme affect gold import? The reason why this bullion scheme is launched is that because gold is now a currency, more people might be interested interested in converting their hoard or wealth of gold into currency. So people might be interested in depositing the gold and converting that into bullion or currency. This gets more gold into circulation. And the moment more gold comes into circulation, it is accessible to government. Instead of being tied up in treasure, wealth, etc., which is in private hands, now it's accessible to government. So in case we have a current account deficit problem, government can use the gold which is available as currency to fill the demand for gold in the country. So that is how bullion scheme affects the gold import and the current account deficits. Another good question which has come is MSP versus FRP. So we discussed FRP when we discussed sugar cane price. Sugarcane pricing. Now MSP is the price which is given to the farmers. It is given by the Food Corporation of India when they buy the crops. Now MSP normally tends to be higher than the market price for the crops. FRP is the price which is again given to sugarcane farmers only, but this is not done by any institution. This price has to be paid by the sugar mills when they purchase from the farmer. This is fixed by the union government. So FRP is a fair and remunerative price which is fixed by union government and paid by sugar mills. MSP again fixed by government but paid by the government institution when it buys from the farmer. So under MSP, it can be purchased at a higher than MSP price as well. But under FRP is the price at which sugar has to be purchased by sugar mills. So that is the main differentiation between MSP and FRP. Much greater detailed discussion about MSP, FCI, Essential Commodities Act, etc. is available in the economy module. So tablet students would know that all this is comprehensively covered. So current affairs students are encouraged to please refer to material which gives you detail about these issues. However, FRP is in the news, so it is a potential question. So please make a note of that. So those are the important questions we are covering today. The rest of your questions will be sent back to you as a compilation so that we can see each other's question as well and gain understanding from that. We are concluding a lecture today. Thanks for listening. When the notes and the questions come, please make use of them as well. We will be having further webinar classes. The next one will be on India Yearbook. So please come back and attend. It will be another important session because a lot of questions are expected from webinar sessions on India Yearbook. So thanks again for listening. All the best for your exams.